We're coming up on Easter 2025, and it's always the most fascinating time of the year, I think, here in Jerusalem. And so I just wanted to get a better outlook as we approach the Easter season. And I thought, who better to talk to than Father Athanasius, who I have met, and we've spoken over the years. And I thought it would be great if you would be able to give us a perspective on Easter here in the Holy Land. But first of all, would you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and also how long have you been in Jerusalem?
Okay, so yeah, my name is Father Athanasius. I'm from Austin, Texas, and I've been in Jerusalem about, I would say, 31 years, but in different time. Not always. There was a couple of years I was away, but altogether it was 31 years.
Okay, what church are you with? And
I'm with the Catholic Church. I'm a member of the Franciscan Order, and the Franciscans are the custodians of the holy places on behalf of the Catholic Church. And my specific title is Secretary for the Status Quo Commission. And because the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is shared, then of course every one of the churches that are sharing the Holy Sepulchre basically have to have people who are more or less point men, if you want, to at least to lead the negotiations and so forth. So basically, I deal with problems in the holy sites with the other things that concern us and other churches.
okay,
I
okay.
don't deal with maybe problems in other holy sites where there aren't other churches, but like in the case of the Holy Sepulchre, we have a whole sharing arrangement, which is quite complex.
Oh, one day I would love to also speak about that, and that is extremely complex. And even it does tie into Easter. I mean, because there are also issues over Easter, I'm sure, but anyway, let's start with exactly what the lineup is this year. I mean, I know we've got, when does Lent start? When is Palm Sunday this year? When does Easter land? I wanted to talk about also why, I think a lot of people live on the Western calendar. Easter's on the calendar and that's it. But I know that living in Jerusalem, I've always had to figure out every year which Easter and when.
Okay, so the Greek Orthodox, I believe they started today on Monday, or I think on today more or less. And anyways, the Greeks now are in Lent, and we start on Wednesday. The Catholics start on Wednesday. So,
okay, so it would be March
some
5th.
of the other churches, it may vary from church to church, but all of your Orthodox and also the Greek Catholics start, or the Eastern Catholics start either today, mainly today. So basically all your traditional churches are starting this week. But the West, generally the Catholics begin on Ash Wednesday. So that's next Wednesday.
Okay, all right, so that would be the 12th, March 12th.
Right. No,
Oh, okay.
it's the March the 5th.
March 5th, so in a couple days. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The day after tomorrow.
Okay. Actually, so you started mentioning even the Greek Catholics, and I think, first of all, how many denominations are represented in Jerusalem? Christian denominations.
Actually, there's quite a number. I wouldn't know the exact number, but there is a forum called the Heads of Churches of Jerusalem. When they come together, there are 13.
Wow.
There are basically 11 either Catholic and Orthodox churches, and then you have the Lutheran Church and the Anglican Church are members. But other churches, like let's say some evangelical churches, don't participate in this particular forum.
Okay.
So there are more.
Okay.
There are probably more than 25 different churches here in Jerusalem, but most of them are real small.
Oh, that's unbelievable. 25.
I would say.
Are the wow.
I don't know all the numbers of the different Protestant communities, but there's several. So, but there's some
Are the Maronites part of the Council of Churches and the Holy Sepulchre as well?
Yeah, the Maronites are part of the Council of Churches. You have. I'll talk about the Orthodox first. The meeting is usually presided over by the Greek Orthodox Patriarch, and then you have the Greek Orthodox. You have the Armenian Orthodox, the Coptic Orthodox, the Syrian Orthodox, and the Ethiopian Orthodox. And then on the Catholic side, you have the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem, the Franciscan Custody of the Holy Land. And then you have the Greek Catholics, the Maronites, technically the Coptic Catholics and Syrian Catholics. And I don't know who else, also Chaldeans at one stage were a member of it, but I don't think they're here right now. But anyway, there's the official number is 13.
That's unbelievable. And that's 13 that also have property rights in the Holy Sepulchre?
No, only 5 have not. No, I wouldn't use the word property rights. There are 5 churches. There are 5 churches which have rights within the Holy Sepulchre. Of rights, some have basically rights of possession, and others have rights of use. So, like for instance, well, I won't go into all of that; it's too complex. But basically, there's the 3 major communities which we call the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate, Franciscan Custody, and the Armenian Orthodox. And then you have, we call them major communities, and then you have like the Syrians and the Coptic Orthodox inside. Those are the 5 inside. And then the Ethiopians have a place in the compound up on the roof, basically, of the Holy Sepulchre, or on a side roof, you might say.
Okay, so all of these reasons, all of this is like part of the reason that Easter can be. It's very significant here, obviously, because this is where all of the events happened, but also because there are so many different Christians who celebrate in different ways, and it's all happening right here. And actually being in Jerusalem was the first time I experienced having 2 different dates for Easter. So I wonder if you could explain that, why it is that there's the Western Easter, but then there's the Eastern, and how it falls on different days.
Well, it really is a complex issue. It seems that in the early church, there was various variants. Like some people, some churches celebrated on the 14th of Nisan, like the Jewish Passover. Others celebrated in the Sunday which was nearest. So there was a lot of controversies about Easter and the date of celebration. So in the Council of Nicaea, more or less was decided to have a rule. And the rule, so first of all, Easter always has to be on a Sunday. I mean, it's on a Sunday. That was decided, and it can vary. The Sunday can vary, so it's a movable feast, meaning that it's not a fixed Sunday. In other words, it just depends on the day of the week, and not the day of the week, but the month and and just the way the moon was and it was positioned. And so the basic rule, at least after the Council of Nicaea, was that Easter falls on the first Sunday after the first full moon following the March equinox. The equinox.
Okay.
So basically, that's the basic rule. And but what happened is that the way they calculated it, even back in those days, like right after the council, Alexandria celebrated Easter on one Sunday and Rome celebrated on another, because they had different methods of calculation and computation, even though the principle was it's the first Sunday after the first full moon of the spring equinox. So that introduced, there was already variance, and even there were variants between, let's say, the Irish Church and the English Church. But what happened was then they noticed very early on that at least the Roman Church knows pretty early on, already at least by the 7th century or something, 6th century, the Julian calendar. They were using the Julian calendar. So first of all, it's a lunar calendar, right? Passover was based on the lunar calendar, but already in use amongst the Romans was a, and also the Roman Eastern world was basically the solar calendar, and both calendars were imperfect. They were just imperfect. The days didn't always add up properly, and so what happened was at that stage, the Julian calendar during the time of Nicaea, it was the Julian calendar that was in use, and it was a reformed solar calendar that was named after Julius Caesar. And so it was a reformed solar calendar, but it was slipping. It was basically losing 11 minutes each year, which meant that every 128 years, you lose a day. So it meant that Easter would basically end up going further and further towards the summer, and end up in June or July if it wasn't corrected. But here we're talking about one day every 128 years, so you might say that's not a big deal, but already it became a concern throughout in the Middle Ages. I can talk about the Catholic Church. Already theologians were trying to press to rectify the calendar, and there were various attempts, but they didn't manage. So basically, in 1582, Pope Gregory or Gregorius reformed. They reformed the calendar. I think it took about 10 years, and they came out with what's now called the Gregorian calendar. And basically, it was imposed in all Catholic countries. And they had to remove days like 10 days, 11, 12 days from the calendar in order to make it fit. And they had to block out some dates in the calendar, like you went from the 1st of October to the 11th of October. It was October the 1st, and then the next day it was 11th of October in order to make it work. But the Eastern churches did. So the Julian calendar is still in use amongst the Eastern churches, but the Western churches used the Gregorian calendar. So there's already a difference. Now the Gregorian calendar is more accurate, and but you still have to calculate the moon, and you still have to kind of connect it to the lunar calendar, and even there are differences in computation. So that's the reason why Easter can fall on the same day. It can fall a week apart. It can fall 4 weeks apart, or it can fall 5 weeks apart. Now, it's very common it's very common to have it fall 1 week apart for this reason. But sometimes it falls on the same day, on the same Sunday, and sometimes it can fall 5 weeks apart, and that's also quite frequent. So generally, to give you an example, in 1990, Easter fell on the same day, and but it didn't fall again on the same day until 2001, and then it fell again on 2004, 2007, 2010, 2011, 2014, 2017, and now it hasn't fallen on the same date for 8 years. So the last time was 2017, and now we're getting into another question here, but that's in this year it's going to fall on the same date. So it's more common for it to be a week's difference than on the same date. But rarely it can happen on 4 weeks separation, and that happened, I think, 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. There was a 4-week separation, which was the first time I ever experienced it, because it didn't happen in 26 years. So,
Oh, that's so interesting.
So that explains the differences. It has to do with computation and the fact that we're using different calendars, even though the basic principle is the same.
I actually heard from an Israeli who studies Christianity that one of the for the Orthodox, one of the ways they pick the date for Easter, also one of the factors is that it has to also come after the Jewish Passover every year. So according to like everything that you said, they factor in, but then they also add Passover, which sometimes comes very late because on the Jewish calendar they have the 2 months of Adar sometimes, and so it makes everything go later. So I think, for instance, I think that may have happened last year or the year that Orthodox Easter was on May 5th, and it was so late. I think it was last year, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that was so late, but that was also because Passover came later than usual. I think it ended like in late April, and the first Sunday after Passover was in May already. So it was extremely late and arbitrary. And if you go to a country like if you go to Greece, because once we went to Greece and it was Orthodox, it's like everything shut down. Like they actually the resort countries, like they don't open up until Easter has happened. So it was like really late that year where everything was reopening, all because of that. But I thought that was pretty fascinating. But so on the years, so what I was fascinated with when I first got here when I first moved to Jerusalem, it was like it was over 20 years ago. So I experienced some of what you're saying, and I just remember, wondering and realizing, later in retrospect, that it wasn't arbitrary, that it happened on a different date, or that the Easters were different on different dates, but sometimes they fall together. And as it is, maybe you can speak about this, but it seems to be there's more Orthodox here, or at least the Orthodox celebration of Easter is much more crowded. I don't know. Is that the case?
I think honestly that, Easter is the big feast of the church, whether for the, let's call the Western Christians, for the Catholics, all of us, Easter is the great feast. But generally, I find that Christmas, probably in most countries like the United States, Christmas is like a whole, Advent season and lots of celebrations and, parties, whereas a lot of times it's just one day, and it's not I don't think it's surrounded by the same solemnity that it should be, but here it is. So here,
Right.
Easter in the Orthodox world is a very big deal. It really is the big feast, and it's felt. And I would say that generally, my experience is that here in Jerusalem on Easter, that a lot of Orthodox come. They come for the Holy Fire celebration, the Holy Fire, ceremony, and a lot of people come for that. So they outnumber Catholics. Now, if you talk about, okay, we won't go into local Catholics as opposed to Catholics coming from abroad, but I would say that on Easter, Holy Week, generally there are more Orthodox than Catholics here.
So now we talked a little bit about like in the Holy Sepulchre, and of course, if this is the tomb, if this is what people believe is the tomb, this is going to be the place to be for Easter, whether you're, no matter what Christian denomination you are. So what happens? This is an amazing thing, I think, for especially Westerner, and I would love to hear from you also, like the difference maybe going to church in Texas versus coming to Jerusalem to the Holy Sepulchre, and then not just on Easter, but on Easter when all of the denominations are on the same calendar. What is that like here?
Well, the first thing, basically, it's a very subjective experience. I'm not, it's not an object. Each person is going to see it differently. And I can tell a story now, right?
Oh, please. Yeah.
I'll tell you a story.
Cool.
In 2007, I believe it was, we had a kind of a big TV production that time. But anyway, I remember very clearly it was Palm Sunday. So it was Palm Sunday, and the Easter was together, and you could hear the Coptic Orthodox chanting from the chapel they have, the chapel that's behind the Edicule, the Tomb of Christ, and then you could hear the Armenians and the Greeks, and we were starting, and there was a big group from the Midwest there, I think from the Chicago area, and it was a time they were passing out the palms to do the procession, and I found them to be totally bewildered. They had a look of shock on their faces because I don't think they were prepared for this cacophony, which is what it technically is. It's cacophony. It was just so different and chaotic. And even the seating, the liturgical spaces are not good in the Holy Sepulchre as a rule, meaning you're not sitting in a comfortable pew. Sometimes you can't find seating, and there's so much movement and background noise. So it's a different experience. And, people think of the resurrection, a sunrise service, on the mountain, but it's it's totally different experience that way. So I saw this group, and they really looked disoriented. They came with this very popular Catholic priest, and it was a big group, and I really found them, they struck me as being in shock. And then I saw them a week later, and they were totally different, like they had gotten used to it. So I think the first impact, that first impact really makes a big impression. And it's not always easy impression. So one of the questions, I can't talk about myself, what it's like to experience Easter here because it's work. So you go in and you see a massive amount of people, and I'm not thinking this is Easter Sunday. I'm thinking, how am I going to finish on time, or how are we going to be able to process through this crowd? It's that kind of concern. And, we were doing the Way of the Cross, I remember one of those years that Easter was together. And then you have a lot of migrant workers, mainly Catholics,
Yeah.
who come to the church, Filipinos and Indians, and they can fill it up. The place is packed. So when you see those crowds, the first thing you think is my first thought is not, wow, it's great to be here. Isn't this? But the experience of people visiting is entirely different. And, but it's a subjective experience. And I would say that it's probably one of those experiences that you want to get through, going to, I don't know if you ever went to a really loud rock concert where you were happy when it was over, but you wanted to go, sort of thing. So, I think it's something that people, I think the initial contact can be quite shocking experience. It's just so different.
Yeah, I can say that from my own personal experience. The first time that I went to the Holy Sepulchre for Easter, and I don't know if at the time it was both Easters, because I wasn't even savvy to that at the time, but it was, like you said, it was kind of like a rock concert. Like, it was raucous. I couldn't believe, and like, I grew up like having to be quiet at church. This was anything but quiet. And then add to that the brawls that would go on, like, first of all, with the police, trying to get through checkpoints, like, tens of thousands of people trying to get like past police barriers into the church area. And then between the priests, or between, getting, like, you're coming into my space, and, everybody trying to, the pilgrims and the priests, but then also there are other incidents maybe we don't have to get to, but what's happened in the tomb on Easter or on Holy Fire, but it's extremely a unique experience, like having Easter here. But also what I loved was when I spoke with locals, because you touched on it earlier about how Christmas seems to be like the Western, it's done in the West, like it's done up, but here it's Easter. And I remember interviewing a Christian here, and I about Easter, and they said, well, this is my favorite holiday, because if it wasn't for this, if it wasn't for Easter, we wouldn't be Christian. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And it's and this was a local Christian, and it's like, for them to really own the holiday, really step up, like, even though they're minority, and and their status here, but anyway, I really appreciated their take on Easter. I'd be interested to know from you as well, in a normal year, when there's no war or there's no pandemic, and when tourists are coming, what kind of numbers are you talking about that are coming in for Easter?
I really wouldn't know, but I think the big draw is the Holy Fire ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And I would guess that you'd have at least 20,000 people trying to go to it, which they can't, because there's not room for that many people. Mm-hmm. But I don't know exactly how many can go into the church. It's a matter of debate.
Or do you know how many, like, you've got coming through, like, coming, like, not even for Easter Sunday or necessarily, but just kind of coming through at the time? Tens of thousands of Christians? Or?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, Christian pilgrims. It could be more. It could be. There are various. Stories that, like, one year I wasn't here in '85, or they said 10,000 Coptic Orthodox came. I think it was in 95 or something. 10,000 Coptic, and when I was a student here, this was 36 years ago. I remember you couldn't walk in the streets because there were so many Cypriots. It would take you
Amazing.
just to go from the church to the new gate, just to leave the church and get to, let's say, towards a new gate, would take you 30 minutes. It was so crowded. The streets were so packed. Now those older people that used to come, they don't come anymore like that. So but there are still big crowds, and especially when Easter is together. But I can't really give you a number on that, except that, there's a lot of people coming, especially and there's some people who are coming multiple times, like from Cyprus, or Greece. It's close, so they're coming multiple times. I think some Catholics do come because it's Easter in the Holy Land, but if you come, you risk not really finding a quiet place to pray. Especially in our own shrines are very busy. And then you have tours. You might have these, these cruise ships that they land in Ashdod. I haven't seen it. There's very little of that right now because of the situation, but these cruise ships were coming in, and on top of that, you have thousands of other visitors. And it could be throughout Holy Week. Even on Good Friday, they were showing up because, they advertise Good Friday in Jerusalem. That's what some tour operators are doing. So you get this massive influx of people. So I think some Catholics, groups, they avoid it because it's a different experience. I mean, it's probably, might be easier on an individual, but some it's a choice you make. Whereas if you come in a lower season, it's a different experience. It's just because when the Holy Sepulchre is really crowded, it's hard to navigate. There isn't really a place for quiet prayer sometimes. There isn't. I mean, we have two chapels that are basically going to be occupied with groups, so you can't actually go in there and find a quiet place because they're being used. And so inside the basilica itself, you have people shouting because they have to wait in line to get into the tomb and a whole bit like that. So it's busy. So I think some people wouldn't come during, they might be avoiding Easter because it's so busy, potentially so busy. And if you come, you're not going to be able to get into the tomb necessarily. That's I can say that, no problem. If you come during Easter, it's the tomb is occupied by one rite or another most of the time, and I've had people just bawling their eyes out because they couldn't get into the tomb. So I've seen them. Wow. So that's what you risk. Now, of course, it's really not busy, and I don't think this Easter will be that crowded. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think it will be as crowded as normal. But you see, the Orthodox from the different, like the Russians or I mean, there's reasons why they may not be coming this year, other reasons, but generally you get a lot of Eastern Europeans, Orthodox from Eastern Europe coming, and the numbers are large, like Georgians, Serbians, just large numbers. And, not everybody's going to get into the tomb. And they're basically coming for the one thing that, they're really coming for the Holy Fire ceremony, I think. It's the big event to be there. And not everybody can get in. And just to see them, I mean, I know you've probably seen people, you have to have a ticket, you have to go through strict security and so forth. and it's very difficult to get to the church, and on that day, and of course, that's the problem with coming if you come on Easter. Like once in a while,
Right.
some Catholic group might come. Now they usually have a guide who will orientate them, but if they came without a guide, they might find that they can't even get into the Christian quarter on Holy Saturday this year. If you don't do your homework, that it's a day where basically you're not going to get into the Christian quarter. You're not going to really be able to get to the Holy Sepulchre on Saturday morning, on Holy Saturday morning. It'll be so busy.
Yeah, I've seen that in action, with the because the police do crowd control at that time, especially for the Holy Fire, but Easter in general, the week is very crowded, with locals, even with pilgrims from overseas. But I've seen, they will block like right outside the Armenian Quarter. You can't get into the tunnel even. They block off all access to the church, so that you can get out into the Armenian church and out of it, but you can't then go like toward Jaffa Gate to go to the church. And people are so disappointed. And this is what they came for, was that. But if you don't have a ticket, to show them or a bracelet, whatever they've been doing lately, then you don't get in. And there's always, I don't know if it's happened yet this year, but with the police sit down with the heads of the churches and say like, we're only going to let this many people in this year. And then the churches say, no, like it's not enough, or, it goes back and forth, I think, negotiating different accusations back and forth of why it's being limited and lack of freedom of worship, or, well, no, there's a fire code and only 2,000, so anyway, I don't know if it's happened yet, but I'm sure even with smaller crowds this year, it'll probably happen again this year, as we get closer to the Holy Fire specifically. But, so I don't know, do you have any other, like over the years here, I don't know if you have any other interesting stories or anything else, like anything else you would like to tell us about your time here during Easter?
Well, I'd have to think about that, but yeah, you meet a lot of interesting people from all over the world. Once I met a Coptic monk, an Orthodox Coptic monk, and so he wanted to come along with us on the Way of the Cross. He was from the States, and so you will meet a wide variety of very interesting people, and but it depends really on if you're visiting, like you meet people from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And almost every year I meet somebody, from some place I've never heard of before or something. So there's a lot of interesting contacts like that. And I think that generally a lot of the pilgrims are, very positive. It's overall it's a very positive experience for them, but it's one of those things that there's so much information going on. And generally, when I think about pilgrimage and why it's so important is that you come and you see the holy places, and it's there's so much information. And maybe you're tired, and so what happens is the experience itself is rather exacting. You have to get on the bus in the morning. If you're with a tour, you have to get on a bus in the morning, so it can be a very exacting experience. But then when you go home, you unpack it, and when you hear the scriptures proclaimed in your church, whatever church it is, you can say, "Wow, I was there. I was in Capernaum. I was in Jerusalem." You know, the gospel says, and he went up to Jerusalem, because you have to go up, and all of that geography clicks, and then it becomes, I believe, a life transforming experience. It's like a tool. I would say pilgrimage is like a tool for, at least for Catholics, for re-evangelization of Catholics, because it can awaken in you. It's where you're actually going to a place where we believe these things happened. I mean, I have no doubt about Jesus having lived on this earth and, you know, died in Jerusalem and being here. So just being, there's a good story that is told by Thomas Friedman in his book, From Beirut to Jerusalem. And he basically says that Neil Armstrong came and they showed him, you know, they went up to the Temple Mount, Haram al-Sharif, and they showed him the steps. He said when he walked up on the same steps near where the temple was, they told him, his guides told him, this is, Jesus walked on these steps. So he said, this is more exciting than walking on the moon. That's what Jerusalem, you know, does to people. It takes on a different dimension altogether, because it's connected to people's faith and so forth. So if under that, what happens is people, like I guided a couple around 25 years ago exactly. They told me later it was one of the most exciting. It was in June or something, if I recall, and it was in June or July, and they told me it was like one of the best trips they ever had, and they had particular experiences here, like, let's say, I said a mass for them inside the tomb, so that they said that was.
Wow.
That was something they always remembered. So there's things that happen here that people always remember. That's part of the draw. And then the variety, like all the information you're seeing, you know, you have contact with you know, there's the Jews, the Muslims, the Eastern churches. There's all this variety and color, and it's just there's so much variety in these communities. You know, you always see something you never saw before, and so I think it's for people. It really makes an impression on them, but it might be one of those. It's like a time release experience in some cases. You know, it matures in you. It's an experience which matures. But everybody has a different experience of it. But it's generally very positive. I also saw people who, I remember once there was a TV journalist following the Way of the Cross and making these, you know, they weren't impressed. You know, some people don't like it. You know, they come and they think it's, maybe they think it's commercial, or they just don't, it just doesn't fit with what they expected. So there's situations like that too, but I think most people, also, if you come with some faith, this place can enhance it. But if you don't have faith, then, well, you're just a tourist, you're going to have another experience. So, you know, we have to say that.
No, those are really good points. You talked about when, you know, how people come and experience all the religions at the same time, which is also interesting. What is it like here when all of the holidays happen at the same time? Because it was recently that it was Ramadan, Passover, and Easter season all together in 1 month, with pilgrims and worshipers of all religions coming to the little old city of all places in the world.
I remember it happened in 90 that more or less the first day of Passover, I think it was 90, the Eastern churches were on the same day, the first day of Passover, and also the last Friday of Ramadan. And that really requires, you just got to create all barriers, and they basically, we have to be able to do the way of the cross, while the Muslims are all trying to get in and out of the mosque. This year we won't face that, but when it does happen, it's not a problem in the church so much. It's a problem with traffic around. It's not so much a problem in the Orthodox, in the Holy Sepulchre Church, but the problem does occur that how do you do the way of the cross on Friday if it's the last Friday of Ramadan? Like how do you
Wow.
how do you do that? We did it, but you need a lot of police support, and it's just a super busy day. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work on those days for the police. But this year, our Ramadan will be finished by the time we get to Holy Week.
This year, though, you'll have the Palm Sunday processions. It will be like all the denominations. So it looks like, and then also the way of the cross. So all that looks like those will be pretty crowded days as well.
Yeah, but we have different. Some of the events are staggered. Like one of the most popular, I think, and beautiful ceremonies, and which everybody enjoys, is the Palm Sunday march, because there's a lot of room for everybody, and it's very, very international. But it's obviously it's basically Catholics and other Western Christians participate. The Orthodox have a procession on Saturday because we have ours on Sunday, and so it's one of the more popular. And everybody can participate. There isn't a space problem, and there's and so it's a very kind of festive atmosphere. People who participate in that generally are excited. You're excited while you're there, doing it. For us, it's work because we have a night office, and then we have to get up really early in the morning. Then there's a long ceremony in the Holy Sepulchre, and then you basically, just after lunch, you have to leave early. You have to go to the Mount of Olives, which is generally just hard to get there because it's so busy, so crowded.
Yeah.
To go there to the staging area.
Wow.
So,
I love also the scouts. It's like unlike anything that we have in the U.S. for Easter, but for all of the holidays, but the scout groups that are associated with all the churches that lead the processions, that are playing instruments and marching. I just think like it really does make it so festive. And Palm Sunday is like, it's just one of the best days of the year I think for Jerusalemites.
yeah, and they all dress up, in their finery, and they get these really elaborate weaved palms, and all that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I am absolutely fascinated. 20 plus years living here in the city, but the holidays never cease to fascinate me, especially when they converge. I think it just makes it so interesting, and I really wanted to. I'm happy to speak with you about this and really get your take, professionally and spiritually, but also you have a lot of experience and you the difference, like experiencing this, like in the US, but also now in Jerusalem and with all of the other denominations as well. So I think you offer a really fascinating perspective.
Thank you.